After all these years, people are still fighting about the characters in The Mentalist. Some of them get defended like family, and others get dragged in basically every time their name is mentioned. So today, let's break down the most loved and most hated character of The Mentalist. Starting with one of the characters that fans didn't expect to love, JJ LaRoche. JJ LaRoche is the name most people in this fandom are embarrassed about getting wrong the first time.
What's your secret, Mr. LaRoche? LaRoche.
He shows up running the investigation into who killed Todd Johnson inside the CBI, and every single thing about him is built to make you nervous. He talks in this flat, careful voice, he never blinks at the right times, and he builds a suspect list with all of our favorite people sitting on it. Then, there's the container. He keeps this box that nobody's allowed to ask about, and for 2 full seasons, the show just lets you assume the worst thing you can come up with. Then, in Season 5, Episode 21, Red and Itchy, somebody steals it, and LaRoche has to go to Patrick Jane and ask for help getting it back. That's the moment the whole character flips over. All that stillness that felt threatening the first time reads completely differently once you know what he's actually protecting, and the guy who played like a walking threat turns into one of the loneliest people the show ever put on screen. The next name is one they never admitted anything about, and she's the first sign that this ranking isn't necessarily about who deserves what, as much as it is about how the fans feel on any given day. Kim Fisher. Kim Fisher never really had a shot, and it's worth being honest about why. She meets Jane while he's living out of the country and hiding from the FBI, and she plays the whole thing like a coincidence. It isn't. In Season 6, Episode 9, My Blue Heaven, we find out she's been working with Dennis Abbott the entire time. And the Friendly Stranger Act was part of an operation to bring Jane in. She helps get him back into the country, she works the cases through Season 6, and then she transfers out before Season 7 even starts. The complaint you'll see over and over is that she got dropped into the show as a Lisbon substitute and never earned the seat. People also hold the lying against her, which is where it gets funny.
She's looking into the camera like she knew it was there.
Because Jane lies to people as a job. He does it to suspects, to cops, to his own team, and nobody has ever taken a single point off him for it. The other thing working against her is how little the show ever gave her to work with. Even the people defending her end up arguing about her job instead of about her, and that's a rough way to win anybody over. Meanwhile, on the other side, there's a guy who spent 7 seasons being decent to everybody and still can't crack the top of the most loved list. Wayne Rigsby. Wayne Rigsby is the warmest person on the original team, and he's nobody's number 1. He's the loud half of the partnership with Kimball Cho, where Cho says almost nothing and Rigsby fills every silence, and that pairing carries a huge chunk of the early seasons. He's also the guy who will physically put himself between the team and whatever's coming through the door. Every time, no hesitation. His whole story is Grace Van Pelt. They start seeing each other in secret because the CBI has rules about it. They get caught, they break it off, they spend years around other people, and then they finally get married, have a kid, and leave law enforcement to run their own security business. In Season 6, he's part of the group that corners Richard Haybuck, and by the end, he's the only one from that original team who walks away with exactly the life he wanted. So why isn't he higher? Because the thing fans love him for is the same thing they complain about. The jealousy gets repetitive, the on-again, off-again stuff eats a lot of episodes. Even his own defenders will tell you the show ran that story straight into the ground. Being likable clearly isn't enough on its own, and the next name proves it because she has a reason for every single thing she did, and it didn't save her at all. Lorelei Martins. Lorelei Martins shows up at the end of Season 4 as Red John's messenger, and the way the show introduces her to Jane is by having her sleep with him, which was the plan the whole time. That alone puts a lot of people off her permanently.
Your freedom, our night together, that was a gift from him.
Then Jane starts working on her the way he works on everybody, and he finds the crack. Red John killed her sister Miranda. Once she gets that confirmed, she turns completely, and she goes after the people around him, killing one of them and leaving another one shot and barely alive in a hospital bed. And here's the part that stings. She had a deal with Jane, and she walks straight out of it because she doesn't want him getting to Red John first. She wants that for herself. Red John kills her in Season 5, and she goes without ever handing Jane a single thing he could use. Half this fandom looks at her and sees somebody who got groomed, used, and thrown away by a man who had already taken her family. The other half can't get past how much control she has over Jane and how many episodes she takes up having it. She talks in this slow, knowing way that some people find magnetic and other people find unbearable, and that gap has never once closed. That's the first genuinely split reaction on this list, and it's not the last. The next one is split the exact same way, except she's standing on the loved side of the line, and the people who can't stand her are just as loud about it. Grace Van N. Pelt. Grace Van Pelt joins the team in the pilot as the rookie, and the show immediately hands her the one trait guaranteed to cause problems. She believes in the spiritual stuff. She's open to psychics, open to signs, open to the idea that there is more going on than what you can measure, and she's sitting 3 feet from a man who built his entire personality around proving all of that is a con.
There's no such thing as real psychics.
I beg to differ. My cousin Yolanda's a psychic.
Your cousin.
Then the show does something genuinely cruel to her. She gets engaged to Craig O'Laughlin, and at the end of season 3, he turns out to be working for Red John the whole time. She survives it, keeps doing the job for 3 more seasons, marries Rigsby, and then gets taken by Hybach in season 6 as part of somebody else's revenge. The people who love her point at exactly that. She takes the worst hit anybody on that team takes, and she keeps showing up to work. The people who don't say she's too trusting, that she never learns fast enough, and that her romance storylines eat time the show didn't have. She's easily the most divided character on the loved side. Nobody's divided about the next name, and after 4 debatable characters in a row, let's finally get to somebody the entire fandom agrees on. Richard Hybach. Richard Hybach is the guy people forget about until his name comes up, and then they remember exactly how much they hated watching him. He starts out as a suspect during the Red John investigation, and the team treats him badly. Really badly. That part is on them. The problem is what he does with it. He comes back later hunting the people who did it to him, going after former CBI members one at a time, and in season 6 he takes Grace Van Pelt. That's the line. Whatever sympathy he built up from getting roughed up as a suspect is gone the second he starts collecting people. What lands him here instead of lower down is that he gets hated twice over. There's the stuff he actually does, which is simple enough. And then there's the fact that a lot of viewers just find him miserable to sit through. The voice, the way he stands, the way every scene he's in seems to take twice as long. Those are 2 completely different complaints, and he collects both of them. Tommy Volker works the same way from the opposite end. Rich, connected, tied to more than one killing, and for most of season 5 he's untouchable because he can afford to be. Fans hate him for the entitlement more than the murders, which tells you a lot about how this audience keeps score. That's hate doing exactly what the writers want it to do. The next one is hate that fell apart on its own, because he walks in acting like the enemy and ends up somewhere nobody saw coming. Dennis Abbott. Dennis Abbott arrives to tear the CBI down, and everybody hates him for it, which is completely fair on a first watch. He's the FBI guy who shows up after the Blake Association gets exposed. He treats the whole building like a crime scene.
FBI Supervisory Agent Dennis Abbott.
He chases Jane out of the country, and he talks to Lisbon like she's furniture. If you're watching this show the way it wants you to watch it, from inside Jane's corner, Abbott is an obstacle and nothing else. Then it turns. He's the one who negotiates Jane back into the country and into the FBI. He builds a team and then protects it like it's his. And by season 7, episode 9, Copper Bullet, Jane and Lisbon and Cho are all running a plan to save him from Bill Peterson, which is the exact reverse of where the 3 of them started with him. Here's what makes the rewatch feel so different. Abbott walks into that building right after somebody discovered a corrupt network living inside law enforcement. He's got a DEA background, an Iraq War record, and one very simple problem, which is that he can't tell yet which of these people were part of it. Suspecting all of them isn't him being a jerk, it's the only move available to a person in that job on that day. You just can't see it the first time because you're too busy being on Jane's side. Time fixed that one completely, but time is also why the next name is so complicated. Red John, Thomas McAllister. Red John is the worst person in this show by a mile, and it isn't close. He murders Jane's wife Angela and his daughter Charlotte before the series even starts, and he does it because Jane went on television and made fun of him.
He's an ugly, tormented little man. A lonely soul.
He leaves a message on the wall for Jane to find when he gets home. Then he spends 6 seasons growing from one man with a knife into an entire network with people sitting inside law enforcement, using accomplices, using cops, using anybody he can get his hands on. In Season 6, Episode 8, the one just called Red John, he turns out to be Thomas McAllister, the Napa County Sheriff, and Jane chases him down and kills him. That's the end of the thing the entire show was built on. So he should be sitting at the very bottom of this list, and he isn't, and the reason is strange. This fandom's problem with Red John was never that he's evil. Evil was the job, and he did it well. The problem is the reveal. McAllister barely appears before Season 6, and after 6 years of clues and rules and mythology, a lot of people felt like the answer didn't come close to earning any of it. Even fans who defend the choice will tell you the setup was thin, which means the hate he gets isn't really hate. It's disappointment wearing a costume, and disappointment burns out a lot faster than the real thing does. So, the worst person in the show still isn't the name people bring up most when they're listing who they can't stand, which sounds ridiculous until you see who's left. Before that though, this next beloved character cost the fans more than anybody else on this list. Michelle Vega. Michelle Vega gets 10 episodes and does more with them than characters who got 3 seasons. She joins Abbott's FBI team at the start of Season 7 as a rookie on her first posting, and she's ambitious in that slightly annoying way, always trying to prove something, always pushing to be in the room where it's happening. Cho takes her on. He trains her like a rookie, which mostly means he's short with her and gives her nothing, and then at some point he quietly stops treating her like one. She finds a killer on her own a few episodes in, and the look on his face when she does is the closest thing to pride that man ever shows anybody. There's also Jason Wiley, who has a crush on her that you can see from space. He's the computer guy, he's awkward, and he gets braver in these tiny little steps every time she's in the room. It's the sweetest thing in the final season. And then, in Season 7, Episode 10, Nothing Gold Can Stay, she gets shot during a robbery, and she dies.
Hey, Michelle, look at me. Look at me, Michelle.
Cho grieves out loud for the first time in 7 years. Wiley completely falls apart. Jane starts asking himself what his work actually costs the people standing next to him. The comparison people always make is that Vega is early Van Pelt, not Fisher. Same setup, rookie, joining a team that's already built, desperate for approval. The difference is, the show let people care about her before it asked them to. And it managed that in about 4 episodes. That's what it looks like when the fans decide they care about somebody. The next name is what it looks like when it decides they don't. And he never did one single thing to earn it. Marcus Pike. Marcus Pike shows up in Season 6, Episode 16, Violets, working an art theft case, and he does the most dangerous thing anybody can possibly do on this show. He's nice to Teresa Lisbon. That's the crime. That's the whole thing. He's an FBI art squad agent. He's polite, he's steady, he asks her out like a normal person would, and she says yes. Then he gets a promotion to Washington and asks her to come with him. Then he proposes. And then at the airport, Jane finally says the thing he's been refusing to say for 6 years, and she picks Jane, and Pike goes to Washington by himself. Go read any thread about him, and you'll see the same 2 arguments running side by side. The people who can't stand him say it moved way too fast, and that he backed her into a decision she wasn't ready to make. The people who defend him point out that he told her exactly what he wanted and exactly when, which is more than Jane managed in 6 years of standing next to her, saying nothing. Here's the part that matters for this list. Pike doesn't lie to anybody or manipulate a single person. He's not corrupt. He's not violent. He's not hiding a thing. And he still shows up in least favorite threads, sitting right next to actual murderers. He's the cleanest proof in the whole show that this ranking has nothing to do with what a character does, and everything to do with where they're standing when the audience wants somebody else there instead. And if being decent can't save you, it works the other way too. Which brings us to a guy who might be the safest name in the entire fandom. Kimball Cho. Take Jane out of the options and Kimball Cho is the name that keeps coming back. Ask this fandom who their favorite is when Jane isn't allowed on the list, and it's Cho more often than it's anybody else, and he gets there by doing less on screen than the rest of the cast combined. He was in a gang before he was a cop, which the show mentions and then mostly leaves sitting there, and that history quietly holds up everything he does. He runs interrogations by saying almost nothing and letting the suspect fill the silence until they hand him something. He runs stakeouts with Rigsby that are basically a comedy act where one guy talks nonstop and the other guy answers in 4 words. He's also the only member of that original CBI field team already working inside Abbott's FBI operation when Jane turns up, which tells you exactly how the people above him rate him. And he's the one person Jane can't move. Jane can read anybody in the building, get in their head, find the button, and press it, and Cho just looks at him. That joke never gets old because Jane's entire thing is control, and Cho is a brick wall. Then Vega dies, and the show finally lets it out. He sits at that funeral, and you get maybe 4 seconds of what's actually going on underneath, and after 7 seasons of a completely flat face, those 4 seconds hit harder than any speech the show ever wrote for anyone. This fandom even has a phrase for him that gets repeated constantly, that there's no business like Cho business. It's silly, but it's stuck. Because it's the only kind of tribute that fits a guy who would be embarrassed by a real one.
The Cho. No business like Cho business.
206.
Nobody's arguing about him. Plenty of people are arguing about the next name, and it's the loudest fight in the fandom. Erica Flynn. Erica Flynn murdered her husband. Let's start there, because the arguments about her have a habit of skipping it. She's a matchmaker who kills her husband and then talks another man into helping her cover it up, and Jane proves it in Season 3, Episode 19, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, after a whole episode of the two of them circling each other and enjoying it way too much. She gets convicted of voluntary manslaughter instead of murder. Then she helps the CBI on a case, uses that furlough to walk straight out of custody, and disappears. Then she turns up again in Beirut in Season 7, runs another play on Jane, and finally gets taken back in. The people who hate her say the show keeps filming a killer like she's a movie star, keeps letting her out, keeps letting her get one over on Jane, and that none of it is earned. The people who love her say she's the only character in 7 seasons who can genuinely match him, that she reads him as fast as he reads her, and that watching Jane get outplayed by somebody using his own toolkit is the most fun this show ever had. Here's the thing that makes the fight unwinnable. The show already proved this audience will forgive that exact behavior. Brett Stiles runs a cult, sits on information about Red John, and helps Jane only when it happens to suit him. And this fandom loves him. Walter Mashburn is a billionaire who treats homicide investigations like a fun weekend, and this fandom loves him too. Neither of those men is a good person. They just show up rarely enough to stay fun. And neither one ever gets close to anything the audience is trying to protect. Erica does. That's the entire difference. That argument has been running for years, and it's not getting settled. The next name is so high up on the loved list, there's basically nothing to fight about. Teresa Lisbon. Teresa Lisbon spends 7 seasons cleaning up after a man who lies to her constantly, and this fandom loves her for reasons that have nothing to do with patience. She runs the Serious Crimes Unit at the CBI, which means she's the one who answers for everything Jane does. He tricks a suspect, she gets the complaint. He walks into a place he has no business being in. She's the one standing in an office explaining it. She puts her badge on the line for him more than once, and not because she's a pushover, but because she keeps making the same call, that catching the killer is worth the paperwork afterward.
Didn't think we'd get there so soon.
Then the CBI collapses under the Blake Association, and she loses the thing she built. She joins the FBI, works under Abbott, starts over in a smaller chair, and she does it without falling apart in front of anybody. The romance is where all of it lands. She gets engaged to Pike, she's got a whole life mapped out in Washington, and in Season 6, Episode 22, Bluebird, she's standing in an airport ready to go when Jane finally tells her. She picks him, they get married in the finale, she tells him she's pregnant, and Teresa Lisbon becomes Teresa Lisbon Jane. There is one honest crack in the consensus, and it's worth saying out loud because it's the only thing anybody ever criticizes. A chunk of the fandom thinks the romantic turn came out of nowhere after 6 years of the show refusing to move on it, and that the last stretch rushed something it had been sitting on forever. But that complaint is actually aimed the writing. Nobody's blaming her for it. That's how you know where she sits. When the worst thing people can say about a character is that the writers didn't serve her well enough. She isn't the problem. she's the measuring stick. This next person never killed anybody and she never sold anybody out, and she still ends up as one of the most hated. Christina Fry. Christina Fry gets brought up in least favorite threads more than almost anybody else in this show, and she never hurt a single person. She shows up in Season 1, Episode 7, Seeing Red, as a psychic. A real one, according to her. She does a reading, she's calm about it, she's completely sure of herself, and she doesn't budge an inch when Jane tells her she's running a con.
She's a fraud. I'm going to expose her.
How do you know she won't really pull it off?
That's the whole conflict, and it's basically over before it starts, because the show spent its first 6 episodes teaching you that psychics are frauds, and that Jane is the smartest person in every room he walks into. So when she pushes back, the audience doesn't hear a debate. They hear somebody talking down to the guy they came to watch. She comes back in Season 2, and it gets worse for her. She talks about Red John in public, which is the one thing you cannot do in this show, and he takes her for it. When she turns up again, she's broken in a way the show never really fixes, acting like she believes she's already dead. That should have turned her into a tragedy. It mostly didn't. People still call her smug and full of herself more than they say anything else about her. So, why does her name come up more than the actual serial killers? Part of it is that the show never settles the question. It never tells you whether she was a fraud, whether she believed it herself, whether she was just very good at reading people the same way Jane is, or whether it meant something else entirely. That argument has been open since her first episode aired, and unresolved arguments don't cool off, people just keep picking them back up. But the bigger part is who she was arguing with. Jane's fake psychic career is the reason his wife and daughter are dead. He went on TV as a psychic, he insulted a killer to sell the act, and Red John came to his house. So when Fry sits across from him saying the thing he pretended to be is real, that isn't a friendly disagreement to him, and it isn't one to the audience watching everything through him either. It plays like she's pressing on the exact wound the whole series is built around. None of that makes her a villain. She's just standing in the worst possible spot, holding the worst possible opinion. In front of the one man, alive, who can't hear it.
Dead or dead. You can't talk to them.
And yet I do.
So in a show about crime and deception, the name that gets dragged the most belongs to a woman who never hurt anybody. Which means the love side is probably just as backwards, and it is. The name at the top of this list has a body count attached to it. He lies to nearly every person he meets, and this fandom would go to war for him. Patrick Jane. There's a best character poll on the show's subreddit where Patrick Jane pulled 349 votes out of 571, with the entire rest of the cast splitting whatever was left over. It's one poll, not a census, but that isn't winning. That's the rest of the show fighting over scraps. And here's what all those people voted for. Jane used to be a fake psychic, not a guy with a hunch, a full professional fraud who charged grieving people money to talk to their dead relatives. He was good enough at it to get himself on television, and one night he sat on television and made fun of a serial killer to make himself look impressive. Red John went to his house. Angelo and Charlotte were both dead before Jane got home, and there was a message waiting for him on the wall. Everything after that is a man using a police department as a weapon. He doesn't consult for the CBI because he cares about closing cases. He does it because it puts him close enough to the one case he actually wants. He lies to suspects to break them, and lies to his own team about what he's planning next. He runs schemes that put Lisbon and Cho and Rigsby and Van Pelt directly in the path of a killer, and he keeps running them long after it stops working. At the end of Season 3, he corners a man named Timothy Carter, sure he's finally got Red John, and kills him. Wrong man. Then, it's 3 more seasons of suspect-less and dead ends, and people around him dying for it. And when he does get the right one, he chases him down and kills him too. Then the show does the thing nobody expected, which is keep going. He runs, and then he gets pulled back. He builds a second life inside the FBI, and eventually, he does the one thing that took him longer than catching a serial killer, which is telling Teresa Lisbon how he feels before she gets on a plane.
Lisbon, it's Jane. If you get this, call me, please.
He ends the series married with a kid on the way, sitting inside exactly the kind of life Red John took off him in the first place. Now line him up against the people we just went through. Kim Fisher got buried for one lie she told during an operation. Jane lies before breakfast. Marcus Pike got buried for moving too fast with Lisbon. Jane let her wait 6 years, and it cost him nothing. Christina Fry got buried for being sure of herself in front of a man who was more sure of himself than anybody in the show's history. Every single thing this fandom holds against the most hated characters on this list, Patrick Jane does harder, more often, and with a much higher body count attached to it. 349 people picked him anyway, and not one of them was voting for a good man. Let us know who you loved and hated the most in the comments, and subscribe if you want more Mentalist breakdowns like these.